Today, let's take a look at success. Because this, in the end, is what every one of us is looking for. What is success? What makes for success? Researchers have been investigating the performances of sports persons, particularly because the results show immediately. And have been struggling to find out, to put their finger on what is it that makes for peak performance. You yourselves have seen in the recent past the Indian cricket team performing dismally until recently. And suddenly, it's as if they were a transformed lot, as if it's a different team altogether. What is it that makes the difference? Is it talent? No, it's the same people, the same talent, the same training, the same hang-ups. Then what makes the difference? We need to understand this not from the viewpoint of the sports persons, but from our own viewpoint. Because each one of us comes up with spectacular performance, but only sometimes. And at other times, we're mediocre. Sometimes we are dismal failures. But that's not enough. Today, the world is demanding excellence from us not once in a while, not occasionally, but every single time. The question that arises in our minds is it possible, first of all? Is the human system capable of perfection at all? Or are we doomed to imperfections? When you look at our system, the internal system, you find we have been designed physically, physiologically. We've been designed to perfection. Every single cell in our body, every single aspect of our personality is absolutely perfect. And in this perfect system, you and I seem to muck things up so badly. What is the root cause of all this disturbance? What is the cause of all this suffering? Eventually, we are the ones who suffer. So, what is success? Is the question. Martin Luther King said, if a man is called to be a street sweeper, he should sweep streets even as Michelangelo painted, or Beethoven played music, or Shakespeare wrote poetry. He should sweep streets so well that all the hosts of heaven and earth will pause to say, here lived a great street sweeper who did his job well. This is what success is all about. It's not about one person coming up with outstanding performance. It's about every single individual, right from a Nobel Prize winner to a street sweeper. If each one of us works like the way Martin Luther King says, what a wonderful society we'd come up with. But no, yes, we come up with excellent performances, but they are islands of excellence in a sea of mediocrity. So the challenge before us is to identify what makes for success. And so, as we said earlier, people who investigated sports persons particularly, whether it's a Tiger Woods or a Sania Mirza or a Sachin Tendulkar or whoever it is, and they found that success comes from essentially a calm mind in which the intellect is focused, sharp, clear, incisive. And this combination of a calm mind and a focused intellect leads to perfect action. This is not the discovery of modern investigators. This is what the Bhagavad Gita said 5,000 years ago. What is it that they said? Yogaha karmasu kaushalam. Yoga is perfection in action. And this perfection in action comes from samatvam yoga uchyate. Equanimity of mind, tranquility of mind is yoga. Without calmness of mind, you have no control over your performance. Sometimes you may be brilliant, other times you may be a dismal failure. But that's not enough. Would you go to a surgeon who once in a way comes out with a brilliant performance, at other times the patient dies? Would you go to such a surgeon? Would you go to a lawyer who sometimes wins cases for you, at other times he sleeps through his cases? No, you want perfection. And yet, every one of us is unreliable because the mind is not calm. And this unreliability, see, you may be extraordinarily talented, you may be gifted, but attitudinally fragile. Depending on your mood, depending on your attitude, your performance varies. You may be brilliant, but stubborn. You may be lethal, but terribly arrogant and egoistic. This morning I came across a situation where I made a suggestion to a person. Said, can we do this? Before I could complete the sentence, he attacked me by saying, oh, you find yourself another engineer. If I wanted to find another engineer, why would I come to you? So these are the things that are the roadblocks that stand in the way of our performance, stand in the way of a calm mind. So therefore, the analysis of what makes for a calm mind followed. They basically arrived at 3 kinds of actions that you perform, that you can perform. Number 1, niyatam karma. Niyatam karma means obligatory duty. This is the highest caliber of action that anybody can perform. Next, kamya karma, desire-driven action, where the desire to do something, to acquire something is so strong that it takes away from your obligatory duty. And then the desire mounts to such an extent that it cannot be fulfilled by ethical, moral means, and you cross the line to what is known as nishiddha karma. Nishiddha karma, prohibited action. Prohibited by what? By whom? By whom? No Shastra. Your own conscience. Prohibited by your own conscience. So these are the 3 kinds of activities that we can perform. As long as you restrict yourself to niyatam karma, obligatory duties, your mind will be calm, your intellect will be focused, your actions will be perfect. The moment you stray away from obligatory duties and go into the area of desire-driven activity, you lose your calmness of mind, you lose the tranquility of your mind. And this can happen in an instant. Therefore it is that a sports person who's performing brilliantly, suddenly you find the character of his play changes and he's out. This happens to all of us. The moment you stray away from niyatam karma, you've had it. Nishiddha karma that is suicidal. And what you need to understand is that all of us are performing nishiddha karma. All of us are focusing on desire-driven activities. Very few of us are focusing on obligations. What is my obligation? Nobody thinks of. So all you have to do is focus on this niyatam karma, you'll be fine. How many of us lead our lives based on obligations? And therefore it is, since we tend to get, you see what happens is, the desires, when you fulfill a desire, you get pleasure instantly. So this instant gratification lures us away from the path of obligatory duty. Because when you perform your obligation, in the beginning, it need not be pleasurable. And since all of us are driven by profit and pleasure, you tend to neglect your obligations. But in the end, it's the performance of obligation. That's why in the 3rd chapter he says, Niyatam kuru karmatvam. Exhorts Arjuna and all of us, just perform your obligation. That's all you need to do. Now, because we are tempted by selfishness, they had, the ancient sages, had got certain rituals in place, and these rituals were so powerful that they reminded generation after generation of Indians to focus on niyatam karma. And this was, one of the rituals was yajna, which incidentally is performed till this day. The ritual is performed. The significance is lost. So what we need to do is revive the significance. And then you may or may not perform the ritual. This is what Krishna did at that time, the time of the Mahabharata. He totally internalized this ritual in chapter 4, where you can perform yajna every minute of your life. What is this yajna? Yajna literally means sacrifice. Because what happens is, it is selfishness that disturbs the mind. It is desire that disturbs the mind. And so they came up with this ritual called yajna. When you perform a yajna, basically it's fire sacrifice. It's a fire ritual. Anything that you do, you start a new office, you get married, you have a child, whatever happens in our life, you have a havan, right? Yajna. And this is meant to remind us of the fact that you have to stay away from desire-driven activities and move to unselfish, selfless activity. So the yajna, the havan kund, this brick wall trough represents the field of activity that you are engaged in, and every participant, all the, let's say an organization, all the employees of the organization come in every morning and they offer their talent, their ability into the kund. And that offering of the talent is called ahuti, is the offering, which you pour into the fire. And this ahuti is usually ghee or grain. When you offer ghee or grain into fire, what happens? The fire gets kindled. The fire shoots up. And when the fire shoots up, the belief is that fire god has been propitiated and is blessing all the participants. This is the ritual. But Krishna in his wisdom internalized this ritual, and when he told Arjuna to perform yajna, he did not mean start a fire outside. He meant start the fire of unselfishness within. Kindle the light of knowledge within. Fire is a great purifier. It takes care of any impurity. Similarly, unselfish activity, sacrificial activity takes care of the most deeply embedded vasanas and desires in your system and purifies you completely. So, when you offer your talent into the kund or the field of activity that you're engaged in, then what happens is the organization does well, whether it's a commercial organization or a hospital or a college or a school or whatever it be. And when that unit, that entity does well, you and I, all the participants of the organization do well, every shareholder, every stakeholder does well, society does well. Then Krishna says, the world is bound by non-yajna activities, non-sacrificial activities. If you perform selfish action, if you're driven by just concern for yourself and personal profit, then you also don't do well, the organization doesn't do well, nobody does well. So the question is, now, the whole thing is converted into a ritual because any activity that you do must be punctuated by a worshipful attitude. That is why there is a combination of intellectual focus and mental surrender, a worshipful attitude towards whatever it is that you're doing. Those of you who are watching the cricket match this afternoon would have noticed one of the younger cricketers, as he was walking out of the field, he did a namaskar to the field. A musician, before he starts his performance, does namaskar to the equipment, the musical instrument. And this signifies, we're not talking about the actual namaskar, please, that you may do, may not do. But we're talking about the attitude. You must have an attitude of surrender towards the field of activity, as against having an egoistic concept that I am, as they call it, kartrutva bhavana and bhoktrutva bhavana. I am the doer. I am the enjoyer. Instead of that, you surrender to a higher ideal. So this yajna is very important. Why is it important? Because a higher ideal, see, the crux of this yajna is the fixation of a higher ideal, which only a human being has the capacity to do. Therefore it is that even in the 3rd chapter, he says, Saha yajna praja sruštva purovacha prajapatihi anena prasavishyadhvam eshavos tvishta kamadhuk. When the creator Prajapati created the human being, he created the human being sahayajna, along with the capacity to sacrifice, which is denied to all other creatures. So it is a privilege that you are able to sacrifice. No other creature has this privilege. Therefore, use it. This is a gift that you were born with. And he says, with this may you prosper. What does it mean? It means if you don't sacrifice, it is impossible to prosper. And therefore it is that all of us, we have success in fits and starts, bursts. The rest of the time we don't achieve success because we are not working in a spirit of sacrifice. Yajna. With this may you prosper. Let this be the kamadhenu of all your desires. Kamadhenu is the mythical cow in heaven belonging to the sage Vasishtha. And this cow, Kamadhenu, has the unique ability of granting the wishes of anybody who approaches Kamadhenu. Right? Now you will sit there and say, why don't you cut short your series of lectures and just give us the address of Kamadhenu? You will save us the trouble of coming here three more evenings, is it? Yeah. And you will save yourself the trouble of unnecessarily blowing your lungs out. But the problem is, if I knew Kamadhenu's address, I'd be the first one there. What he means is, when you function in a spirit of sacrifice for a higher ideal, your lower desires automatically get fulfilled. See, one of two things happens. Either the desire gets fulfilled or the desire gets sublimated. In other words, you rise to such an extent, you're so focused on the higher ideal that the lower loses its charm. It no longer has a grip over you. So you really don't care whether you get that or not. One way or the other, your desire gets rooted out of your system. That's the main thing. Because how did we start? We said a calm mind makes for excellent action. And how do you get rid of agitations of the mind? By dedicating your actions to a higher ideal. Unless you have a higher ideal, your mind will never be calm. And the more you get obsessed with yourself, the more agitated you will be, and these agitations will spill over from the waking state to the dream and deep sleep state also. So such a person will get nightmares, such a person will not be able to sleep. So your whole life gets ruined because of these mental agitations. And all you have to do is just shift your thinking. And that shift in thinking can happen this moment, right now. You don't have to wait. There is no gestation period at all. Right this moment, you shift your thinking and you snap out of your selfishness and you're a completely different person. Let's hope this happens to every one of us, so that on Saturday evening at 8 o'clock, we walk out totally transformed. It may not happen. This complete transformation may not happen. But a little bit, just a little shift in the thinking, that's enough to keep you going. So, the higher ideal, what does it do? The moment you fix a higher ideal, it unlocks a great deal of potential within you. You come to realize that there is a whole lot of energy, resources within you that were left untapped, unknown, unimagined. So all this energy gets released, and the most important thing is it gives you peace of mind. And thereafter, the result doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether the result of your endeavor is success or not. You remember yesterday I spoke of this movie Iqbal. This village boy, Iqbal, had a dream of being included in the Indian cricket team. And he worked so hard for it that right at the end, those of you who haven't seen it, I don't want to divulge everything. Right at the end, when he is told that, look, whatever you do in your lifetime, you will never get into the Indian cricket team. He says, it's okay, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because I have achieved my objective anyway. So in other words, he's transcended the Indian cricket team. He's achieved his objective. This is what happens to all of us. The result doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether people speak ill of you or speak well of you. Within yourself, you are at peace. And this is the state that every one of us should strive for, because then success is entirely under your control. As long as you're dependent on the fruit of the action, which comes from outside, which is dependent on other people, you'll always be a slave. It'll always be possible that you don't achieve it. But as long as you take it unto yourself, you're independent, you're free, you're liberated. So this spirit of yajna, when you function in, nature conspires to serve you. It is incredible what things happen to you. Yesterday, this is a true incident. Sometimes I cook up stories, but this one is a true one. Yesterday, first thing in the morning, I had to take someone to a hospital for some investigations. And as the patient went inside, and as I was waiting outside, the receptionist told me a story that was incredible. She said, just the previous evening, she had paid the first installment for an apartment that she wanted to buy. And the bank from whom she had applied for the loan, the bank manager ditched her and didn't give her the check in time. The builder gave her an ultimatum. He said, you pay by this evening or else the apartment is gone. And after work, she was walking home, obviously distressed, obviously in great pain and agitated, when she met an acquaintance of hers whom she hadn't met for 15 years. She met the gentleman after 15 years, out of the blue. And he came up to her and said, what's the matter? You look very stressed. So she says, yeah, I have a problem. And he says, what's the problem? She didn't even want to tell him because she didn't think it was possible for him to help her out. Because what she wanted was 7 lakhs that she had to pay the builder. So, but because he asked her, she almost in a fatalistic manner said, she narrated the whole incident and said, I need 7 lakhs. You know what the guy said? You'll get that check by 7:30 in the evening. She said, from whom? He said, I'll send it to you. You know what the story was? 15 years ago, when she last met him, he was in dire straits, and she had loaned him 2,000 rupees, just 2,000 rupees, 15 years ago. And that man hadn't paid back the 2,000 rupees to her till date. For 15 years he hadn't paid her. And he told her, says, you have no idea how what a terrible condition I was in 15 years ago when you loaned me that 2,000 rupees, when you gave me the 2,000 rupees. And I used that 2,000 rupees. With that, I have now become a millionaire. So he gave her back 7 lakhs. And the long and short of this whole story is this lady, the next morning when I happened to be there, she couldn't get over it. How is it that 2,000 rupees has converted into 7 lakhs? What an investment. Wouldn't you like to make an investment like that? But the problem is, when she gave him that 2,000 rupees, she had no idea that it would come back to her. And at the right time and the right place. If he had given the money to her 1 year back, she might have squandered it and she might have done something else with it. But she got it exactly when she needed it. This is what it does to you. You meet with serendipitous experiences. You come across sudden, unexpected, totally unimagined, happy, successful experiences in life. But for which you have to first invest. How do you invest? Perform yajna activities, says Krishna. This spirit of yajna pervades the entire universe. Every single element in nature functions in a spirit of yajna. The sun gives light and heat. Have you ever heard of the sun giving solar bill to us? There are companies that tap solar energy and bill you. But the sun never bills. The flowers give fragrance. No flower in the world ever registers it in the patent office. Have you ever heard of a flower saying, my fragrance must be patented and anybody who wants the fragrance must pay me? No. The perfume industry extracts the fragrance from the flower and then patents it. But the flower gives of itself freely. So also the river waters, the clouds give rain. Every single element in the universe seems to function in a spirit of yajna except the human being. And therefore it is that no other element in nature is stressed, no other element needs, Prozac, no other element needs a psychiatrist except the human being. And it is the human being that imagines that cats and dogs have stress and they give Prozac to the cats and dogs. This is the height of madness. You haven't heard of it? Because what happens is when you are in stress, you believe the whole world is in stress. So you want to treat others for the stress. The result of all this is 3 things happen to you. You gain enormous success way beyond your imagination. You find happiness in the here and now. You find fulfillment in the very action without depending on the fruit of action. And most importantly, you develop spiritually. As you fix your sights on a higher and higher ideal, all your thoughts, your energies are focused on that. The lower desires get starved, lose their hold on you, drop off. This is how you evolve spiritually. So, why we're talking about this is because every one of us is looking for this combination of success, happiness, and spiritual growth. And Krishna says, if you don't perform yajna, na siddhim, na sukham, na param gatim. You will not get siddhi, success, you won't get sukham, happiness, nor will you evolve to the highest state of perfection. Now, coming back to chapter 7, we'll move on to verse 7. There is nothing beyond me, O Dhananjaya, winner of wealth. All this is strung on me like rows of pearls on a string. So, as we saw yesterday, this entire chapter, the first 6 verses deal with the 2 aspects of me. Now, with the 7th verse, we enter the second topic, expressions of Brahman. How does this Brahman, which is unmanifest, express itself in the world?